Hi everybody, my name is Dr. Tim Baghurst and I'm the Director of Sports and Coaching Science at Oklahoma State University and also have a small sports performance practice called GOAT Sports Performance as well. I've been asked by SASA, the Stillwater Area Sports Association, to provide a few educational videos for coaches and also parents who are interested in this topic. And today what I want to present to you is how do you actually run a practice, because sometimes what I see when practices are run are kind of discombobulated, as you will, disorganized, kind of random practices that have no real purpose. And there's a real opportunity here for coaches to really prepare for practice and run an efficient practice. As a consequence, you end up with a much better team and probably happier athletes as well. So let's get right into it. And first I want to kind of point out this quote down at the bottom right from John Wooden, famous basketball coach, who says, "Never mistake activity for achievement." And what he's saying here is that we can do a lot of busy things, but it doesn't really mean we're getting better. And that's sometimes what happens in practice, especially with youth sports. So we're going to look at kind of the beginning, middle, and end of practice as we go through this. So let's get going. Before you start, though, you have to consider who you're working with. Male, female, co-ed, what sport, what age. All of these things are important to determine how long you can run practices for, how long they can run a specific station for, how fast they can throw, kick, etc. That has to be catered when you set up practices. The second thing is you have to look at your philosophy and values and ask what's most important. I've done a video on this already in terms of your philosophy and values, but really your practice should be a reflection of what you value as important. If it's fun, then how is your practice set up so that it models that? If it's skill development, same thing. If it's both, how do you incorporate both of those together? Also look at how long their attention can be held, and this is difficult. A general rule is about 2 times their age is how long you can effectively run a station, for example, or a specific practice. You need to be cognizant of that and understand that I can't expect my young athletes to throw balls for 35 minutes and be engaged, working hard all the time, focused, etc. It's just not going to happen. And then also consider your housekeeping items. How do you deal with who's bringing what for next practice, when our next game is? How are we going to handle all these things? Do you do it at the beginning of practice or do you do it at the end? Start time is an important one too, and it's easy to get a little bit lazy here. And I love this quote: if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And really it's on you to start on time. You don't have much time when you have practices. You don't see these athletes very often, so when you do see them, you need to use all of the minutes effectively. I mentioned John Wooden already. He was famous for writing out an entire season's worth of practices to the minute, because he wanted to make sure he used all the time he had with his athletes. So what can you do to help or create a culture where athletes are on time? Well, it starts with you being an example and being there well ahead of time, getting things set out, getting your station set up so that you're not trying to do all this busy work while they're there waiting to start. And establish those expectations, and not just with the athletes, but also with the parents. Make it a priority. Unfortunately, you're going to have some athletes who are late or who don't show up regularly. What are you going to do about it? I'm not saying there's any hard or fast rules here, but it's something you have to consider. Are you just going to, hey Johnny, just get in here and catch up with everybody? Well, what about all their warm-up that they missed, and so now they're going in cold? Again, it's something you have to consider. I'm not going to provide you with the absolute solutions because every situation is different. But this will happen. Also look at warm-ups. And the reason I mention this is because it's something I rarely see. And your typical warm-up is everybody shows up and maybe runs a lap or 2 around the field. Well, that's just not fun for most people, including myself. Really, what's the purpose? Prepare the body for exercise, increase heart rate, blood flow, get the body temperature up, improve your flexibility, be ready to start practice. Well, you don't have to do that by just making somebody run around the field or throwing balls to each other. You need to make sure it's long enough, but it also has to be engaging, relevant, and interesting. How can you make warm-ups fun? How can you make warm-ups interesting so that your athletes are actually engaged in the warm-up process? Can you create a game out of it? Can you have them moving around the field, throwing and catching, or some kind of competitive environment? Sure, why not? There doesn't have to be this dull, kind of boring standard, let's go, let's just get through this so that we can get on with practice. Then in the middle, again, you need to think about this skill development aspect. What are you trying to teach them? If fun is part of your core values, and I hope it is, if you're coaching children, how are you going to make it fun? Are you going to create stations where they move from one place to the other to keep it a little bit engaged as opposed to doing something over and over and over again for 45 minutes? Then the MVPA, moderate vigorous physical activity, is something that a lot of kids don't get very much of. And what I see sometimes in practices especially is a lot of kids standing around doing very little. They're not very engaged, they're not very active, so they're not really getting that physical activity. Educational component as well is something you could incorporate, especially if it's in your core values. How can you teach nutrition? How can you talk about sleep or what they should be doing before they come to practice or a game? All of these things can be taught, life skills per se, into your practices. But how do you do it, or when do you do it? And then this last one is periodization, and what you're looking at behind the middle circle there is actually the periodization training schedule of an Olympian. It's very complex, it's very complicated, it goes through a whole season, and what I'm trying to show you there isn't that you should set out something similar for, a group of 8-year-olds, but how can you periodize or design your practices to get them to the best situation at the end of the year? What needs to be taught first, for example? What skills need to be practiced? Does their fitness need to be a focus at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of the season? All of these things need to be considered rather than just going, oh, today I think we should practice this, because that's what I see a lot of, and it's very ineffective coaching. And then closing, look at the cool down and stretch. That's something, again, I don't really see much of. What I see is everybody take a knee. Let's deal with some housekeeping stuff. Okay, get out of here. We're late. Well, your body's been moving around. It does need to cool down. It can be stretched. Stretch being lengthening the muscles so that they're more flexible and able to perform more effectively. Also avoids injuries as you go from being physically active to doing nothing at all. Everything tightens up. And then clean up. If you've got balls all over the field, for example, how does that get picked up? Are you using your athletes, assistant coaches, or are you going to find yourself cleaning everything up after everybody's left? Recovery is important as well, especially very hard practices, and that's teaching or providing that education for your young athletes on how they can recover. Teaching the parents as well is great. I don't see very much homework given in terms of what they can do at home to practice or improve, whether it be watching a YouTube video or reading an article or studying a certain player or even getting out and doing some physical activity. Why not? I mean, just because they're not at practice doesn't mean they can't be practicing. But if you don't give them some direction, chances are it's either going to be done incorrectly when they do practice, or they're not going to practice at all. The last thing I like to do is talk about what's coming next. We've talked about maybe what we've done during the practice, but then prepare them for the next session so they know what's coming and they can start thinking about it rather than, okay, see you at our next practice. If you've planned out your schedule, you know what you're practicing next and you can tell them. Well, I hope this has been useful in some way in terms of how you set out and operate a practice. Every sport, every age is different and every coach is different, but there's some general guidelines. Of course, if you want more information about myself, it's there at my website, and also Stillwater Area Sports. Their website is there to see what sports they offer and what ages and how you can be involved in coaching. Until next time, though, thanks so much for watching.